July 11, 1970. Chihuahua Desert, Mexico. An American missile crosses the border without authorization. It's not an act of war. It's something inexplicable. The Athena rocket was supposed to land in White Sands, New Mexico. Instead, it landed 200 miles south of the border, in one of Mexico's most remote areas. But the strange thing is not just that the missile went off course. The strange thing is what they found when they came to look for him, and what has been happening in that place since long before 1970. The zone of silence, where compasses go crazy and radios die. Welcome. I'm your name, and this is Podcast Name. Today we're going to talk about one of Mexico's most enigmatic places. A site that has been compared to the Bermuda Triangle has attracted NASA scientists and is home to unique biological species on the planet, and which, according to dozens of witnesses over decades, is regularly visited by beings that shouldn't exist. The Zone of Silence is located in the heart of the Mapimí Basin, where three Mexican states converge: Durango, Chihuahua, and Coahuila. It is a desert expanse of approximately 50 square kilometers, located about 180 kilometers from the city of Torreon. The name sounds poetic, almost mystical. But it was coined by a Petróleos Mexicanos engineer in 1966 when he discovered that radio waves simply stopped working in certain areas of the desert. Today, the Zone of Silence is three things simultaneously: a biosphere reserve managed by the Mexican Institute of Ecology, where scientists study unique ecosystems; a tourist destination where thousands of people come each year seeking paranormal experiences; and an unsolved enigma that has accumulated decades of testimonies, incidents, and phenomena that defy conventional explanations. This case has it all. It has lost rockets, baffled scientists, encounters with humanoids, and one question that remains unanswered: what's really going on in the Zone of Silence? To understand this place, we need to go back. Way back. 60 million years ago, what is now a burning desert was submerged beneath the waters of the Thetis Sea, a prehistoric ocean that covered much of what is now northern Mexico. The evidence is everywhere. When you walk through the Zone of Silence, you literally step on marine fossils. Shells, ammonites, the remains of creatures that swam when dinosaurs still ruled the earth. About 30 million years ago, during the Eocene period, massive tectonic movements uplifted the seafloor. What had been ocean became mountains and deserts. The water receded, leaving behind a mineral-rich lunar landscape crisscrossed with deposits of magnetite and uranium. This detail is important. Remember it. Today, the Mapimí Bolsón is part of the Chihuahuan Desert, one of the largest deserts in North America. Temperatures can exceed 45 degrees Celsius in summer. In winter, they drop below freezing. It's an extreme place. Inhospitable, beautiful in a brutal way. And this is where our story begins. 1966, an ordinary day in the desert. A Petróleos Mexicanos engineer named Augusto Harry de la Pena is working on the planning of an oil pipeline that will cross the desert. He is a graduate of the National Polytechnic Institute. A man of science, he is accustomed to relying on his instruments. But their instruments are failing. Communication radios between the vehicles and the base are distorted. Sometimes they simply stop working. It's not an equipment problem. The devices work perfectly within a few kilometers. But in certain specific areas of the desert, the radio waves simply disappear. De la Pena meticulously documents the phenomenon. He discovers that these dead zones aren't fixed. They seem to move, changing location. And then, with the practicality of an engineer who needs to call things by their name, he baptizes them: the Zone of Silence. The term began to circulate among PEMEX workers. Eventually, it reached the local media. And from there, the name stuck forever. But what Harry de la Pena didn't know is that the phenomenon was much older than its discovery. Let's go back even further. 1930. Francisco Sarabia is one of Mexico's most renowned aviators. An aviation pioneer, He broke the speed record in 1939 by flying from Mexico City to New York in less than 11 hours. But in 1930, while flying over the Chihuahuan Desert, something strange happens. His radar stops working completely. Sarabia has to rely on visual navigation to leave the area. He later reports the incident, describing a specific area of the desert where his instruments were rendered useless. This happened 36 years before de la Peña coined the term zone of silence. 36 years old. Now, fast forward to February 9, 1969. It's 3 a.m. in Escalon, Chihuahua, a small town near the future zone of silence. Benjamin Palacios, a local resident, is sleeping in his house when he is awakened by a deafening sound. First, a low-frequency hum that increases in intensity. Then, the entire sky lights up as if it were day. And finally, an impact that shakes the earth. What just fell is the Allende meteorite, one of the most important meteorites in the history of science. El Allende weighs more than 2 tons and fragments into thousands of pieces that rain down on the desert. Scientists from around the world flock to the area. The reason? Subsequent analysis would reveal that the meteorite contained particles older than the solar system. Interstellar material that formed before our own sun was born. It is one of the oldest objects that humans have been able to touch. And it fell exactly in the zone of silence. Chance? Skeptics would say yes. That meteorites fall all over the planet, and there's nothing special about that region. But locals have noticed something for decades. That area of the desert seems to attract meteorites with unusual frequency. So much so that finding meteorite fragments is almost routine if you know where to look. And then 1970 comes along, the year in which the zone of silence would capture the attention of the entire world. July 11th, 1970. 8:40 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. At the Green River Launch Complex in Utah, the U.S. Air Force launches an Athena RTV rocket from Launch Pad 1. The Athena is a test missile. It doesn't carry nuclear weapons, but it does carry something delicate. 2 small containers of cobalt-57, a radioactive isotope used in what are known as salted bombs. Radioactive material that, in the wrong hands, could contaminate an area for years. The launch objective is simple. The rocket must fly in an arc and land at the White Sands Test Range in New Mexico. A trajectory the Air Force has calculated with pinpoint precision. The Athena takes off without a hitch. It climbs. It reaches its apogee. And then something goes wrong. The rocket veers off course. It's not a few meters. It's not a few kilometers. The Athena crosses the Mexican border and continues flying south. When it finally comes down, it has traveled 320 kilometers beyond its target. Land in the heart of the Mapimí Basin. In the zone of silence. The United States immediately contacted the Mexican government. A note of apology was sent. Permission was requested to enter Mexican territory and recover the lost missile. Mexico accepts. This isn't the time for diplomatic complications. This is the middle of the Cold War, and these things are handled discreetly. But this is where things get really strange. The U.S. recovery team arrives with everything: reconnaissance planes, helicopters, tracking equipment, and hazardous materials specialists. They hire local guides to comb the desert. The missile landed in a relatively small area. Tracking systems should be able to locate it within hours, perhaps days. The search lasts for weeks on end, in an open desert, with all the technology available from NASA and the Air Force. How is it possible that they can't find a missile several meters long that fell from the sky? Finally, in early August, almost a month after the launch, a group of Mexican farmers found the remains of the Athena. On August 2nd, 1970, the recovery operation officially ended. But what they do next is what really stands out. The Americans don't just pick up the rocket debris. They build a short stretch of railway from the nearest station, in Carrillo, to the impact site. And they don't just take the missile. Tons of soil are taken from the surrounding area. The official explanation is that the ground could be contaminated with radioactive cobalt-57 residue. Standard procedure. Reasonable precaution. But the questions remain. Why did it take them so long to find him? Why build an entire railway just to remove land? And why, according to some local witnesses, did the personnel involved in the recovery include very high-profile figures? According to Santiago García, a Taurian researcher who has studied the case for decades, Werner von Braun was present during the recovery operation. For those who don't know, von Braun was the German scientist behind the American space program, the man who designed the rockets that took humans to the moon. One of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century. What would someone of his caliber be doing in the Mexican desert, personally overseeing the recovery of a simple test missile? García claims that von Braun would have said something disturbing while observing the desert landscape. If I were an extraterrestrial being coming to Earth, I would choose to descend into the zone of silence, because I would be completely certain that no radar, computer, or scientific device could detect me so easily. Note: this quote is not officially verified. It's important to be transparent about that. But verified or not, the quote captures something essential. Even the most rational scientists recognize that there was something peculiar about that place. The Athena missile incident puts the zone of silence on the map. Literally. Mexican and international media begin reporting on this strange place in the desert where missiles go off course, radios stop working, and meteorites fall from the sky. But it also arouses legitimate scientific interest. In 1974, just 4 years after the incident, something important happens. The Mexican Committee of the Man and the Biosphere program, part of UNESCO, together with the Mexican Institute of Ecology, propose establishing a biosphere reserve in the area. The reason? The area has unique ecological characteristics. Endemic species of plants and animals that exist nowhere else on the planet. The desert tortoise. Unique varieties of cacti. Violet-colored, prickly pear cactus. The proposal was approved. In 1977, the Zone of Silence was officially designated the Mapimí Biosphere Reserve. A year later, on June 5, 1978, the President of Mexico, José López Portillo, personally inaugurated the Desert Laboratory. Since then, scientists from the Institute of Ecology have been working continuously in the area, studying the flora, fauna, climate, and geology. And here comes something fascinating. After decades of research, using radio equipment to communicate between vehicles and the base, telemetry to track animals, experiments requiring signal transmissions, scientists have not reported a single case of electromagnetic interference. 0. The radios work perfectly. The compasses point north. The GPS units stay put. So what's going on here? Did the electromagnetic phenomenon never exist? Or does it only occur under certain specific conditions that scientists have been unable to replicate? Petróleos Mexicanos also conducted its own investigations in the 1970s. They were motivated commercially. If there were significant magnetic anomalies, it could indicate massive iron deposits. If there were gravitational anomalies, it could suggest specific rock formations that would affect its oil exploration. They used state-of-the-art magnetometers and conducted extensive gravimetric studies. They found nothing out of the ordinary. Compasses don't deviate more than expected anywhere else in the desert. There are no masses of magnetic iron hidden underground. There are no gravitational distortions. Scientifically speaking, the Zone of Silence is a normal desert. But then why do strange things keep happening? This is where the case gets complicated, where we leave the realm of hard data and enter the slippery territory of testimony. But these testimonies are consistent, and they come from people who have no obvious reason to fabricate stories. October 1975, 5 years after the missile crash. Ernesto and Josefina Diaz are a couple of geology enthusiasts. They're not ufologists, nor seekers of paranormal phenomena. They just like collecting fossils. On October 13th, they get in their pickup truck and head for the Zone of Silence. They know the area. They've been there before. It's a good place to find marine fossils. They are in the middle of the desert, far from any main roads, when something unexpected happens. A flash flood. In the desert, this can be deadly. Rainwater falling in the distant mountains rushes down dry streams, like a miniature tsunami. If you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you can be trapped in seconds. And that's exactly what happens to them. Their truck plunges into a mud-filled hole. The wheels spin, finding no traction. They're completely stuck, surrounded by water and mud, with no way to communicate with anyone. Ernesto gets out of the vehicle and tries to push it. Josefina is at the wheel, but the car doesn't move. And then, through the mud and rain, they see figures approaching. They are 3 men, very tall men, blonde, dressed in bright yellow raincoats. In the middle of the Mexican desert, where there's no one for miles around. The men don't say anything. They simply position themselves around the vehicle and begin pushing. Josefina describes what follows as impossible. The pickup truck emerges from the hole with an ease that defies physics. As if the vehicle weighed nothing. As if those 3 men had the strength of a dozen. Once the car is safely on solid ground, Ernesto and Josefina turn to thank their rescuers. But there is no one. The 3 men have disappeared. Completely. Without leaving a footprint in the mud. Josefina and Ernesto search the surrounding area. The desert is flat. You can see for miles. There are no rocks to hide behind. There are no vehicles. The men just vanished. This testimony is the most famous. But it's not the only one. Local residents have stories. Stories that have been passed down from generation to generation. They tell of 3 long-haired, blonde visitors who occasionally appear in nearby villages. Always the same 3. Always asking for water. Never food. Just water. They speak Spanish perfectly, without a foreign accent. They're polite. Easygoing. And when someone asks them where they come from, they always give the same cryptic answer. From above. A truck driver driving along the highway reported seeing 5 children on the side of the road. When he approached to see if they needed help, he realized they weren't children at all. They were humanoid beings of small stature, with feline eyes, grayish skin, dressed in tight uniforms. The man accelerated and did not look back. In July 1975, the Mexican Astronomical Society sent a team to the area. They weren't looking for UFOs. They were going to study the desert's night sky conditions, which are ideal for astronomical observation. But what they captured on video was unexpected. 3 spherical objects hovered over the area for more than 6 hours. They weren't moving with the wind. They performed maneuvers that didn't correspond to any known pattern for conventional aircraft. The video, according to reports at the time, was analyzed. But no definitive conclusion was ever reached about what the objects were. So far we have presented the phenomena, the testimonies, the unexplained incidents. But this is a documentary about facts, not paranormal propaganda. So let's talk about skeptics. And not armchair skeptics, but scientists who have spent years studying this case. In 1992, Andrea, a researcher at the University of California, Riverside, presented her doctoral dissertation in anthropology. The title was Common Ground, Ranchers and Researchers in the Mapimí Biosphere Reserve. Spent years living in the area, working with the reserve scientists and interacting with local ranchers. Their conclusions are overwhelming. Claims that the zone of silence, as the public understands it, is essentially fiction. He writes in his thesis, "Neither I nor anyone I spoke to there, apart of course from the Zoneros, had any problems with their radios or compasses while I worked in the reserve." The Zoneros, or silent ones, are, in their definition, the tour guides and operators who take visitors to the area promising them paranormal experiences. They are people who have a direct financial interest in keeping the myth alive. Tells a revealing anecdote. Some tourists arrived in a truck and asked a local rancher exactly where the zone of silence was. The rancher, in all seriousness, told them, "Keep going until you see Martians jumping from one side of the road to the other." The tourists thanked him for the tip, failing to grasp the irony. This detail is important because it shows how real locals, people who have lived there for generations, see the zone of silence as a tourist curiosity, not as a genuinely mysterious place. The late Mexican geologist Dr. Carlos García Gutiérrez was even more critical. He dedicated part of his career to dismantling what he called pseudoscience related to the area. He completely rejected the term zone of silence. He argued that there was no scientific evidence of actual electromagnetic anomalies. But here comes the problem with the absolute skeptical position. It does not explain certain verifiable facts. The missile did go off course, and no satisfactory technical explanation was ever given as to why. Harry de la Peña did document problems with radio communications in 1966. He was a trained engineer, not a charlatan. Francisco Sarabia did report instrument failures in 1930, decades before there were any tourist incentives. And there are multiple accounts of humanoid encounters from unrelated witnesses at different times. Is everyone lying? Is everyone confused? Or is there something more complex going on here? So, what's the truth about the zone of silence? As in most complex cases, there is probably no simple truth. Let's look at the most plausible explanations. Theory 1. Real but intermittent electromagnetic anomalies. The area may experience genuine electromagnetic interference, but only under specific conditions that scientists have not been able to replicate in a controlled manner. The geology of the area is unique. Ancient seabeds, magnetite deposits, and uranium are present. During thunderstorms, which are common in the desert, atmospheric conditions could create temporary electromagnetic fields that disrupt communications. This would explain why de la Peña documented problems in the 1960s, why Sarabia struggled in the 1930s, but why modern scientists find nothing out of the ordinary. Argument in favor. There are precedents for areas with unusual electromagnetic activity in other parts of the world. Counterargument. Extensive scientific measurements have not detected these anomalies, even during storms. Theory 2. Statistical concentration of meteorites. The zone of silence is located at the 27th parallel north. It's the same approximate latitude as the Bermuda Triangle and the Pyramids of Giza. Some have suggested that this isn't a coincidence, that there's something special about that latitude. But scientifically, there is no known mechanism by which a specific latitude would attract meteorites or cause paranormal phenomena. What is certain is that the Mapimí Basin is a large, open area with little vegetation. Meteorites that fall there are simply more visible than in forested or urban areas. Argument 4. Rational explanation based on observation bias. Counterargument. It does not explain why the Allende meteorite, a scientifically extraordinary object, fell specifically there. Theory 3. Deliberate tourist myth. Andrea and other researchers have suggested that the zone of silence as a paranormal phenomenon was amplified, if not outright invented, for tourism purposes. After the missile incident in 1970, there was international media attention. Local tour operators saw an opportunity. They began offering tours, embellishing testimonies, and creating a mystical destination. Argument in favor. Tourism is now a major industry in the area. There are clear economic incentives. Counterargument. It does not explain the reports by Sarabia in 1930 or de la Peña in 1966, when there was no tourism industry. Theory 4. Psychological phenomena and expectation. This one is more subtle. When people visit a place with a reputation for being paranormal, their brains are predisposed to interpret normal events as extraordinary. A radio glitch becomes an electromagnetic anomaly. A light in the sky becomes an alien spacecraft. Encounters with eccentric people become contact with humanoids. Psychologist Michael Shermer calls this patternicity, the human tendency to find meaningful patterns in random information. Argument 4, well documented in psychology, explains many reports without denying the sincerity of witnesses. Counterargument. It does not explain cases like the Athena missile, where something objectively abnormal occurred. Theory 5. Extraterrestrial or interdimensional activity. And then there's the explanation many visitors prefer, that the zone of silence is a point of contact with non-human intelligences. The arguments. Multiple witnesses report encounters with humanoid beings consistent in appearance. The fall of the Allende meteorite, with material older than the solar system. The unexplained deviation of the Athena missile. Sightings of unidentified aerial objects documented on video. The geographical location on the 27th parallel. Argument 4. The testimonies are numerous, consistent, and come from apparently credible witnesses. Counterargument. There is no verifiable physical evidence. No biological samples, no recovered technology, no documented communication. And conventional explanations, though imperfect, are more parsimonious. So, what to believe? Regardless of the objective truth, the zone of silence has had an undeniable impact. Today, the area is an established destination. The La Zona del Silencio ecotourism complex offers guided hiking, camping, stargazing with professional telescopes, nighttime bonfires, temazcales, and hot springs. Thousands of people visit each year. Some seek adventure. Others seek answers. Some simply seek a peaceful place under one of the clearest night skies on the planet. Dr. Benjamin Palacios, who witnessed the Allende meteorite fall as a young man, now runs the resort. He's an interesting man, retired politician, academic, businessman, and writer, and a believer. Palacios claims to have had his own encounters, and he feels he has a mission: to inform humanity about these sightings, to prepare future generations for a possible future encounter. It's easy to dismiss it as mere tourism promotion, but when you hear him speak, there's a sincerity in his voice, a conviction. He genuinely believes that something extraordinary is happening in that desert. Meanwhile, a few miles away, scientists from the Institute of Ecology continue their work. They study the desert tortoise. They document cactus species. They monitor the ecosystem. For them, the zone of silence is valuable, but for entirely different reasons. It's a natural laboratory for studying life under extreme conditions, a unique ecosystem shaped by millions of years of evolution. Two parallel narratives. Two ways of seeing the same place. Both coexist. Both are, in a sense, true. The case has transcended Mexico. It has inspired books such as the novel The Zone of Silence by writer Homero Aridjis. It has also inspired films such as Silence by filmmaker Lorena Villarreal. It's part of the collective imagination, a place where the possible and the impossible blur. And perhaps that's what really makes the Zone of Silence special. It's not like we can definitively prove that anything paranormal is happening there. We can't definitively prove it, nor definitively rule it out. So, let's go back to where we started. What is the Zone of Silence really? After researching this case thoroughly, I think the most honest answer is, it depends on how you choose to look at it. If you're a scientist, it's a biosphere reserve with unique ecosystems and a history of interesting but unverifiable anecdotal reports. If you're skeptical, it's a fascinating case of how a real event, a missile crash, can become a modern legend, amplified by tourist incentives and the human tendency to seek mystery. If you're a believer, it's evidence that we live in a universe stranger than conventional science allows. A place where normal rules are broken, where other beings from other places visit us. Personally, I'm left with this. Something unusual happened to the Athena missile in 1970. Experts have not provided a satisfactory, technical explanation for why it veered so dramatically off course. There's an unusual concentration of meteorites in the area. That's verifiable. There are multiple testimonies from different eras, from apparently sincere witnesses who report extraordinary experiences. But it is also true that rigorous science, applied for decades, has not found consistent electromagnetic anomalies. And it's true that humans are creatures who love stories. We seek patterns. We want to believe there's more to the universe than meets the eye. Perhaps the real lesson of the zone of silence isn't about aliens or magnetic anomalies. Maybe it's about epistemic humility. The humility to recognize that there are things we don't fully understand. That our instruments and theories, however sophisticated, still have limits. And between what we know for sure and what we can rule out for sure, there's a fascinating gray area. A space where things happen that defy our categories. The zone of silence. A place where radios fall silent, meteorites fall, and legends are born. A place that reminds us that there is still room for wonder. That's all for this episode. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the Mexican desert and the limits of the explicable. What do you think? Is the zone of silence a genuine phenomenon or a well-constructed myth? Have you had any experiences with unexplained phenomena? Leave me your comments. I love reading your perspectives. If you found this video interesting, please help me reach more people by liking it. If you want more content like this, paranormal cases investigated in depth, rigorously but without losing the sense of wonder, subscribe to the channel and click the bell. In the next episode, we'll investigate, mention the next case. It's going to be amazing. Thank you for joining me in this investigation. Thank you for keeping an open mind but also critical thinking. And remember, the universe is stranger than we imagine and probably stranger than we can imagine. See you in the next episode.